Hello, good morning. Or is it morning? No, no, it's not. It's afternoon now. I must have got up too early. Welcome to Independence Live. We're covering the BBC protest in order to let the Scottish public know what the BBC have actually been doing to the people of Scotland. So, first off, a wee word about Independence Live. Independence Live relies upon donations from the public, and I would like to point out to the crowd that's assembled here this morning, there is a donation box at the bottom, and also you can take one of the badges for a donation. So anyway, we have lots of really exciting people here today. Peter Abel, I know that every one of you know Peter's output, which has been phenomenal, right? And my very good partner in crime, David McGinnis. This guy keeps me on the straight and narrow, believe it or not, he really does. He stops me saying some silly things, and I'm very thankful to him for that, right? Would you like to say a word, David?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming, and there'll be a line of speakers, and we'll get through what we have to say as time goes on this afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very glad to be here, and I'm going to save my voice for later, okay?
Thank you very much. On with the show.
To paint us with salvation, but no one, no nobody can give you the power to rise got to hold on.
innocent men will fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us use that power. Let us all unite.
And we'll rise over love and over hate through this iron sky that's fast becoming all mine. Over freedom, into freedom, into freedom, from which we'll rise. Over love and over hate through this iron sky that's fast becoming all mine. Over freedom, into freedom,
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out to the BBC today to make some noise. And trust me, BBC, you're gonna hear me at least. I trust you. I heard you got a little message last night about Electro House. Ha! You're gonna hear it. Okay, please welcome onto the mic, founder of Keep the Brand, ex-employee of that vile institute across from us just now, Ruth Watson.
Thank you for having me here today, and thank you very much for coming along. Now, this may surprise you, but I am not anti-BBC. I think the BBC was a tremendous institute. I was so proud to work as a journalist with the BBC. And when I lived and worked around the world, the BBC's name carried great weight. And it wasn't until I came back 3 years ago that I started putting the qualification beside it. When people used to say, oh, what did you do? I'm a housewife now. I'm an angry housewife from Kirriemuir now. But people used to say, well, what did you do? And I said, oh, I used to work for the BBC. And now I say, I used to work for the BBC in the days when it was good. Because the thing which breaks my heart about the institution that we're standing in front of today is that it really used to stand for quality journalism and impartiality and balance. But the thing is that for many of the folk working inside the Pacific Quay today, they still believe in those things. They still want to do a good job, but the problem is that they know that their bosses aren't looking for that. In the good old days, back in the 1980s and 90s, I used to work with two guys who were very close relatives of the then Minister for Culture, a Tory minister. And to this day, 20, 30 years later, I still could not tell you what their personal political viewpoints were when they were carrying out interviews or making programs or making editorial decisions, because they truly believed that impartiality and ethics and fair standards of journalism mattered to everybody across the board, because you can't have democracy, you cannot have a healthy functioning democracy unless you have equal access to the truth and to facts, so that the population can make their mind up. They can make their mind up about the little things, and they can make their mind up about the big things. Now, many, many years ago, I used to be a wee peace camper. I didn't go to university. I went to Greenham Common and to Faz Lane, and I lived in the mud outside the gates for a while. And that was where I became interested in journalism. That was where I became convinced that having access to the facts, to the truth, was important. Because I could see, I'd be doing a demonstration, or I'd be talking to soldiers or squaddies, and I knew what the truth was. I knew what was before me, and I could see the way in which it was being reported, and I could see the way that some papers reported it differed from the way that others did. And that got me really interested, and I got interested in propaganda and what propagandist tools are, because I was interested in the USSR, and I was interested in repression and repressive regimes and how they function. And what alarms me now is to see that we are seeing some of those traits which repressive regimes use in controlling the media slipping in to be normalised in what we see today. So, for example, the other day the BBC had a headline saying, protesters storm bookshop. But the story was, you had a load of right-wing thugs going into a left-wing bookshop that was selling copies of George Orwell's 1984 and attacking staff and disrupting, trying to destroy the books. Now, history has seen that before. That's not a protest. That's far-right thugs trying to stop freedom of speech. And I believe it happened several decades ago in Germany, and it didn't end well. And it's things like that that when the BBC gives a moral equivalence to all forms of freedom of speech, that is an issue. Now, I believe in freedom of speech, of course I do, but freedom of speech comes with responsibility. So when you have the former foreign minister of the whole United Kingdom referring to women, reducing a small group of women to the status of a letterbox, when we see these forms of dehumanization being somehow normalized in different newspapers, or people sort of talking about, well, it's just Boris being Boris. No, it's not. It's somebody with a personal ambition trying to manipulate a small section of our community to then manipulate another section of the community to view them as somehow less human and less valid. And for that to be given any kind of moral equivalence through any broadcaster or any publication, that is when we should get concerned. And I am concerned now. There was a chap called Patrick Howes. He used to be a foreign correspondent in Iraq, and he wrote a really good set of tweets the other day. Go and find them if you can. And he was talking about the moral equivalence. In the old days, if we did a program, if I did a discussion program, I would get the truth and the facts out there in front of people, and I would get one set of honest people with one perspective around those truth and the facts, because the truth and the facts are the truth, and they are the facts. So you get one set of perspectives from one side and another perspective from another side, and you get people discussing around the table, and from that conversation, the wider population can decide what they want to think about that issue. That is democracy. That is people being educated, informed, and hopefully entertained. What you get now is one set of people who are trying to tell the truth, and another set of people who are just plain lying, and you've got the people who are telling the truth sort of arguing about, well, what the truth is, and you've got a liar just rambling on and not being challenged. Now, in the past, as a journalist, I took it, and my colleagues did too, and to be honest, many of the people that I see being slagged off on a daily basis on Twitter, and sometimes quite fairly, I have to say, but some of those people helped train me. I know what they I know what their standards were. I know what they know. I know the level of integrity and dedication that they had. And sometimes I think that we're looking at people who are kind of like, it's almost like Stockholm syndrome that's going on. But these people have got mortgages and they've got kids to feed. And a lot of the time, I suspect what we are seeing is not what they believe, but them trying to keep a hold on a job because they know that their next assessment means they won't get a promotion or they maybe won't get their contract renewed if they step out of line. That's my personal opinion on what's happening. But when I watch, for example, the Scottish Parliament, and I'm watching it with my journalist head on, and I'm thinking, that's the edit, that's the clip that we'll see on the BBC News tonight, that's the clip that STV will run with, that's the discussion that will be on the programmes tonight, or that's what should be on Scotland Tonight later on, or that's what will make the headlines. And then I see the clips coming out, and it's twisted, it's been cropped so heavily and edited so tightly that the full meaning, the full nuance is not there, and we are not able to make full and fair decisions about what the policies are. Now, I truly believe that the SNP, any party which is in power, should be fully under scrutiny and should be challenged at every turn. And as a journalist, I took great delight in being like a terrier with the facts. And if one person told me one thing, I would give them a hard time and I would pull up their past track record. And then the next person who'd be sitting sniggering at the hard time that person had, I'd turn to them and I'd give them an equally hard time. And that's the point. Journalists are supposed to be truth seekers. We're supposed to find out what it is people really, truly believe, get their words on record, get their policies on record, and then hold them to account fairly and equally and without partiality. And the truth should be out there. So, what do we do? What can we do given the current situation? I fully believe that it's not necessarily just some Kafkaesque, Orwellian project to slide this country into a despotic fascist regime, although I have to say I am deeply concerned by what I see. When you hear politicians calling their colleagues traitors, when you see treason being put in huge capital letters across front pages, that concerns me. But what can we do in the here and now? People here today, what can we do? You have the answers. You have the answer in your hand. You've got your mobile phones. You can access the truth if you know where to look. So I would urge you, educate yourself. Go online and have a look. Find out what is propaganda. Find out the tricks of propaganda. Find out what propaganda looks like so you can recognize it and then counter it. Go to the original sources. If you see a story that makes you think it's a bit suspicious, go to the original source. Find the original source, get the clips, get the truth out there. Be legitimate and honourable in the way that you speak. Let's keep it civil, folks. If we want to have a positive future, let's work towards a positive future. And if you think that there is a way that we could do things better, let's have that conversation. I suspect what is happening with Westminster's agenda is the same with the NHS. They've been trying to get rid of the BBC for decades. What people value, there will be a riot about if it is lost. What people don't value can then be undermined and removed. And I suspect in the same way that the Westminster Tories have been trying to get rid of the NHS for decades and they've been trying to privatise the BBC for decades, I suspect what they're trying to do is erode support, erode trust, and then they can say, well, it's not working, we'll just need to split it up and do something else and everything will be privatised. That, I suspect, is a lot of the bottom line. So my final point here, because I'll not ramble on forever, because I could if you gave me the chance. My final point is, we need to be the change we want to see. We need to support that. We need to look at the media that we agree with, and we need to subscribe to that. So I pay my licence fee because I want to know what the BBC is saying. I want to be a part of that conversation. I can't counter what I don't know is being said. I have problems with that, but that's what I do. I also buy the National, and when I finish with the National, I leave it on the bus, or I pop it down to the dentist surgery. I buy the iScot. Now, I'm in a lucky position. I can do these things. But I also subscribe to the television channels I want to see. There's a woman here, Linda Graham. She runs a channel called Broadcasting Scotland. That could be on the television screens for everyone to see if she just got the level of programming out there. But she needs to have the support before she can do that. So please, I subscribe annually to Broadcasting Scotland. Get out there and support Broadcasting Scotland if you can, because that is somebody who is trying to put out live music programmes looking at Scottish music and Scottish culture, discussion programmes looking at Scotland and Scottish culture, and using current affairs programmes looking at it from a Scottish perspective. On. And perhaps we can have a Scottish Broadcasting Corporation which reflects the reality of what is going on, and not just a UKIP voice piece that currently seems to be happening pretty much most weeks on Newsnight. Thank you for your time. Oh, don't forget Independence Live.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you to make applause because you're going to seem to have beat me to it. I'm fixing it. My mixer's louder than your mixer. Okay, just before I pass you on to the next speaker, on Twitter Storm, we're ranking number 7 in the UK. So if you want to give that a little boost and get us up to number 1, jump on Twitter and use the hashtag Scotland Calling. Okay, moving on. We're going to bring on Mr. Peter Bell, wherever you are, my lovely friend. I'm sure you all know him well and doesn't need much of an introduction. You can usually find him causing havoc and mischief on Twitter.
Do you want to speak down there?
Just showing off now, doing the acrobatic stuff. Hi. Hello. Sorry, I thought it was on about 1:30, but here I am. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody see me? I'd like to say I was happy to be here, but I'm not, actually. Not happy to be here at all. I would rather not be doing this. It rather feels like I'm at a trial of an old friend. So I'm really not happy to be here. I'm happy to see you lot, but I'm not particularly happy to be here. The BBC is like an old friend. I was interested to hear what Ruth said there, and the BBC is like an old friend. I remember growing up. This is old geezer reminiscing now, so if anybody wants to go for a cup of coffee, this is the time. Growing up, at one point we lived in this house where there was no electricity, gas lighting, outdoor plumbing, all the rest of it. Pretty squalid place. And my young brother and I, every Saturday morning, our chore was to take our wee toy wheelbarrow and my father would get the accumulator out the back of the radio, an accumulator, a huge battery. My brother and I would put it in the wheelbarrow and wheel it down to the local garage to get charged, so that it was charged up for the weekend. And then that was our treat then. We were able to listen to children's family favourites and the Billy Cotton Band show and things like that. And it was a real treat. The BBC was important to us. And later, I was particularly fond of comedy programmes like Beyond Our Ken and Round the Horn and the Navy Lark and Sorry I Haven't a Clue. The radio was important. The BBC was important. It was part of our lives. And we got to see TV as well because our grandparents who lived nearby, they had a posh house. They had electricity, and they had indoor plumbing, and they had a fridge and lights and a TV. So we would go along there for lunch on a Sunday, and then we get to watch TV afterwards. And 60 years ago, I actually looked it up. What would I would have been watching on the TV 60 years ago on a Sunday afternoon after lunch? And we were watching children's TV, and one of the programs was Circus Boy. All right, it was an American program, but it was shown on the BBC, and it was wonderful. It was a boy and a circus, and he had an elephant, and I was 6 years old, and I thought this was wonderful. And the boy, by the way, was played by an actor called Mickey Braddock, who you'll probably know better as Mickey Dolenz, the drummer and singer from the Monkees. Memories. And then after that, there would be a TV adaptation of a Dickens novel. Yeah, for a long time, I grew up thinking Dickens actually worked for the BBC. I thought he actually wrote for the BBC. The BBC didn't talk like the people in my life, in real life. I never thought that was how real people talked, but that was how the radio talked, and that was how the TV talked. And it was a special voice. And the only person in real life, and we probably all had somebody like this in our lives, and this is an imagined one, but your Uncle George from England, who'd turn up at the house every once in a while, just for an occasional visit. He's not a real uncle. You know, he's maybe some distant relative, or just he's got some vague connection with the family, but you call him Uncle George from England, because he's got a voice. It sounds a bit like the folk on the radio and on the TV, the folk on the BBC. And he's always very dapper, always very well dressed, always very respectable, possibly with a bow tie. And he tells tales of his travel to exotic lands and his adventures, and he teaches you stuff like how to whistle with your fingers, and he makes coins appear out from behind your ears and things like that. And you think he's wonderful, just the same as you think the BBC is wonderful. But then you hear the adults talking one day, and you find out that the reason Auntie Margaret isn't around is because Uncle George from England used to slap her about. And the reason his visits are only occasional, the reason there's long absences, is because he's been in the jail for petty fraud. And the stories that he's telling you are all lifted from the Reader's Digest. And naturally, you're disappointed, and you feel betrayed, and you feel angry. But you still feel a certain affection. And that's the way I felt about the BBC. In 2014, in the campaign leading up to the 2014 referendum, the BBC betrayed me. They let me down. The BBC let itself down. It's not what I thought it was. It's not what it's meant to be. It's failed. The BBC is disconnected from Scotland. Scotland is changing, and the BBC is not reflecting that change. It's no longer relevant in Scotland. It is not of Scotland. It's like the British parties squatting in Holyrood. Down with the BBC. No, I don't want to destroy the BBC. I want to save the BBC. As an institution, the BBC is a great template for public service broadcasting. The failure's not because of the BBC as an institution. It is a great template for public service broadcasting, one we would do well to maintain. And the BBC is not failing because of the licence fee. The licence fee, nobody has ever been able to suggest to me a better funding model for independent public service broadcasting. The BBC's failure is certainly not due to its personnel, its staff, its people. Mostly, they're professionals, decent people, just trying to do a good job. They only want to make good radio and good TV. The BBC's failure is a failure of management, and by extension, a failure of regulation. The BBC, as happens often in large, complex organisations, the BBC has come to serve itself and the British establishment which enables it. It's failed, the management has failed to prevent an ethos developing in which that ethos that has developed has been the cause of the problems that we saw in the referendum campaign leading up to 2014. That ethos is the cause of things like what we recently saw with Wings Over Scotland and Peter Curran's YouTube channels being taken down. That wasn't a failure of the BBC as an institution. It wasn't a failure of the BBC's people. It was a failure of management. Management should have prevented that happening, and the management didn't. BBC in Scotland is broken to the extent that we have public service broadcasting in Scotland. It is failing the public it is supposed to serve. How do we fix it? How do we reconnect our public service broadcasting with the Scottish people? The failure of the BBC is a failure of management. That management is in London. The failure of the BBC is a failure of regulation. That regulator is in London. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I know where we must start. As with all else, we start by bringing it home. Broadcasting in Scotland must be governed in Scotland. At the moment, the BBC is broadcasting to Scotland on behalf of the British establishment. Broadcasting in Scotland must be broadcasting for Scotland. Thank you.
I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who gets drunk next to you. And if yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who's heaving to you. But I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door. But I would walk 500 miles and I would walk 500 more just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door.
Don't stop believing.
Two. Okay, this one came from you.
Oh, aye, what? Onwards and upwards. It'll be a great day out. Come on.
What's happening, John? Where are you taking us?
Aye, John, where are you going?
1, 2,
On the
check.
path to the promised land with Scotland. Come on. What's so good about Scotland? Shite being Scottish. What are you talking about, man?
Aye, what are you talking about? I mean, look at Alexander Graham Bell.
Aye, right enough, there's people like John Logie Baird.
What about William Wallace? Freedom! William Wallace, 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 William Wallace.
Brave and strong, he gets
very well done, isn't it? Okay, we're going to move on. As you can see, I'm having a stressful day. Just as well, I brought spares, innit? Always be prepared, that's what my daddy taught me. Okay. And moving swiftly on, I'm going to hand you over to Mr. David McGinnis.
Good afternoon, folks. On behalf of the organisers, i.e. me and Graham and David, thank you all for coming out this afternoon. I'm a wee bit nervous. I'm not a public speaker, and I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle for everybody else, although it's still going to be along the lines of propaganda. But I'd like to come at this from the angle of what that propaganda does to the psyche of the nation. Now, in 2012, when the referendum campaign kicked off, I started chapping doors. And one of the things that struck me when I was chapping doors was people had the impression that Scotland had nothing to offer the world and couldn't stand on its own 2 feet. I was on doorsteps absolutely gobsmacked. There was generations of people who thought that we had nothing to offer the world, even though we had invented the modern world. And that we can put squarely on the shoulders of that institution behind you all. And the reason I say that is because of the constant negativity that we get from the BBC. Now, when Graham approached me and says, David, we have to do a protest at the BBC, this was about 6 months ago. And I thought about it, and we deferred the date a few times because of some all under one banner marches and things like that. And during that period, I would climb into my truck every morning and switch on GMS. And the constant negativity was wrist-slitting material. And it was no wonder that the people of Scotland thought they had nothing to offer the world. Day in, day out, no matter what sort of press release there would be, what sort of report would come out, this institution would look for the negatives, and that would be the headline. They browbeated us. They browbeated the people of Scotland day in, day out, and they are still doing it. And that's my concern. What does that do to the psyche of the nation when every day when we get up we are told our institutions are crap, that our education system is crap, that our NHS is crap, that our police is crap, that our fire service is crap, that our railways are crap, and every other public institution that we have here in Scotland is crap. And that really, really worries me. That institution behind us, which is based in London, and probably almost all its output is inspected in London, and they're told whether they can release that to the Scottish public or not. But the institutional negativity coming from that building, beamed into your front room, into your radio in the car as you go to work each day, it is atrocious. If we were to believe even half of what these people say, then it's true. We are too wee, too poor and too stupid if we can't think above what these people are saying. The constant negativity is a big worry for me, and it should be a big worry for us all, every one of us. We have crime at a 40-year low. Police Scotland are crap according to these people. We have educational attainment at an all-time high. Last week, the stats dropped by 0.2%, and this lot went to town on the education system. Day in, day out, we hear it about our NHS. You know, how much under pressure they are, how crap they are. Well, I'll tell you, 6 months ago, I snapped my Achilles tendon. I had first-class service from the NHS. And every time these people opened their mouths, it was NHS crap. I'm surprised that our staff in the NHS didn't bombard that building. I'm surprised they didn't storm the building. If I was working in the NHS listening to what was coming out of that building each day, I would have quit. I'd be on the first flight to Australia looking for another job. These people are doing such damage to our society that it's not true. You know, it is absolutely frightening, the damage that they're doing to our society. And I wonder about the damage they are doing to the psychology of the country. Our future generations growing up hearing, you're rubbish. Your education system's rubbish. Your health system's rubbish. Your police are rubbish. Everything's rubbish. These people would have us believe that we are incapable of running our own affairs. And this took me to the 2014 referendum, when a certain Miss Joanne Lamont on television said that we are not genetically designed to make our own decisions. I watched that woman be bombarded. And do you know what? She never blinked an eyelid. She actually believed it, and that got me thinking, is this some sort of mind control? Is this brainwashing? Because that woman, she took pelters in the press. She took pelters on social media. She took pelters from us all. Never batted an eyelid. She actually believed that we are no capable of making our own decisions. And that terrified me, because that made me think, how long has this brainwashing been going on that a senior politician in Scotland, in our parliament, does not believe that we, the people, are capable of running our own affairs? Remember, we invented the modern world, and there we have the leader of the Labour Party at the time telling us that we were not capable of running our own affairs. And that lot in there are responsible for that mindset. They really are. And it is frightening. We have a generation coming through at the moment who are being told that we are absolutely incapable of running our own affairs. We had 55% of the population believe that we are not capable of running our own affairs. And that has to do with that institution there. That London-based propaganda machine, because that's what it is in Scotland. That's exactly what it is in Scotland. Now, I do not for 1 minute believe that the people in that building are bad journalists. I do not believe that for 1 minute. Which means that the editorial control is not coming from that building, because they are not broadcasting on our behalf. They are broadcasting to us, and they are telling us that we are not good enough. And that is not what we want from our broadcasters. Well, the answer is quite simple. We need our own broadcaster. Do you know, as the wee Ginger Doug said, we are the only devolved country in the planet that doesn't have its own broadcaster. But that's no mistake. That's deliberate. The people who run that institution there do not want the Scottish people having a conversation with themselves. Because if we start to talk to ourselves and we start to talk to each other, we are going to realise that we are more than capable of running our own affairs. We are going to realise that we did invent the modern world. The propaganda that these people put out to us every day, coming into our homes and our cars, are coming through instruments that we invented. We invented the television. These people are exploiting our ingenuity to suppress us. And that scares me. And it scares me of what it's going to do to the psyche of the nation as we move forward. This constant negativity is really depressing. So I thank you all for coming here today, because it's important that we let these people know that we are very disappointed with their output. We are very disappointed in their attitude. And we are not happy at being told we are not good enough to run our own affairs. I don't really have much more to say than that. I'm not a public speaker, as I say, but as I climb in and out my truck each day and I put that radio on and I listen to the constant negativity coming out of that building, I know the damage it's going to do to our nation. So we have to get out and we have to protest. We don't just have to protest this institution. The next target should be the Scotland office. Now, marching up and down the streets is excellent for a public profile, but we need to attack the institutions that are attacking us. And that's that lot in there and the Scotland office. And we need to make it clear to these people that we are more than capable of running our own affairs. We are more than capable of having a discussion with ourselves, and we are more than capable of making our own decisions. As I say, once again, thank you very much for coming here today. Certainly, sir.
Why is it when the BBC get an expert? Can I just ask everyone here who does listen to the BBC in Scotland, because we don't have a choice, to try and get some nugget of wisdom. Every time they have an expert on for BBC Scotland, in almost on every occasion, it's an expert from outside Scotland. They could be from Germany, from England, from Australia, whatever. Now, this is an insidious way of making us feel that we're incapable of discussing any issue, whether it's mental health or the amount of whales and dolphins in the Murray Firth. Does anyone realise that this has a drip, drip, drip effect on us? And it's a way of undermining us, it's a way of neutralising us, it's a way of making us a colony. Inward head. Inward head. It's come to my attention that every time I see a Union Jack flag, that's a sign that Scotland is a colony. Yeah, sorry. Okay, right. Every time, right. Every time, what's happening? Yep. Every time we see a Union Jack flag anywhere in Scotland, it's not a sign that we're British. It's a sign that the colony is up and running and dominates Scotland's culture. This is why I was so pleased when England did well in the World Cup, that they flew not the Union Jack, but the English flag. And good luck to them. I didn't feel any antipathy or hatred towards them. I wish them all the best. And the fact that they flew their own flag proved that they were starting to become aware of their own culture, their own needs, and they weren't trying to dominate another culture by flying the Union Jack. This is all very, very important. Now, many, many years ago, I was in Shiel na Gael, and we tried to take down the Union Jack flag in Edinburgh Castle. And of course, we were seized upon by Special Branch, and we were sort of warned off. Then the police came. It was an innocent ploy, but it showed you how important that the Union flag is for our colonisers. That flag represents control over Scotland. That flag emphasises to the establishment that we are a colony, and also to ourselves that we are lesser than the whole. So I'm not saying you should fly the Scottish flag every day. That'd be silly. It'd be great. It'd be great. But just remember, when you see that flag, it's not a flag of unity. It's a flag of domination. And we want it out of this country as soon as possible. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
What's your name? Just in case you didn't catch the chap's name, this was George Brown, and it's so lovely that we get people that are able to come up and speak like that. So thank you, George. Big hand for George, please. Right.
Okay, ladies and gents, the furthest travelled speaker today, 13 hours, what a journey. You're a brave lady, Frankie. Please welcome to the mic, Frankie.
Frankie, you're going to be able to help you?
I'm not sure. You might need.
Right, okay. Right, well.
Any firemen here with a crane to get me up the steps, eh?
All right, no, just stay there.
I didn't need the mic.
There you go, Frankie.
Hi, I'm sorry if people can't see me, but you're not missing much if you can't see me, I tell you that. Hiya. I left home before 6:30 this morning. I'm mad. I've just got off the bus. It's over 6.5 hours journey to get here, and it'll be another 6.5 hours journey to get back home. I live in the frozen north. I'd like to thank Graham and all the organisers for letting me speak, because nobody knows who I am. And as I say, Thank you. It's lovely to be here, I tell you. It's absolutely lovely. When I was thinking of coming, part of me was thinking, what's the point? You know, they're not going to pay any attention to us. They treat us like mushrooms. Listen, one of the disadvantages of coming here late is I've missed other people's speeches, so other people might have made the same jokes. So I'll not finish the joke, because you probably know it anyway. And anyway, there are kids here, so I better not finish the joke. But they do. They treat us like mushrooms, okay? They're not going to pay any attention to what we say. And the joke is, they're the branch office. They are treated with just as much contempt by the BBC head office in London. And let's make no mistake, folks. Let's make no mistake. The clue's in the name, British Broadcasting Corporation. It is the propaganda wing of the government, you know. So if we are treated as mushrooms by that lot in there, think of what they think of us down in London, eh? We're not just mushrooms, we're inferior colonial mushrooms, okay? So here's a wee message from an inferior colonial mushroom. First of all, to BBC journalists, okay, they're not paying any attention to us, but they will listen. We're all being recorded. We're all on film. I hope you've got my best profile. I think there's less of a double chin on the left, I think. They'll listen to us, but not pay attention, if you know what I mean. Any BBC journalists who, and I do try and distinguish between the ones who just read the autocue and the ones who decide the policy and write the propaganda. But if there are any of you in there, or anywhere, who are a bit uncomfortable with what's going on, but you can't leave your job, okay, that's okay. I'll just tell you a wee story, because I'm old, I remember these things. About 50 years ago, there was a man who worked for the American government, and he secretly gave information to the people researching the Watergate cover-up. And his information, he kept working for the government, and his information brought down the American president. So, BBC journalists, I'm just saying, if you're in a position where you can't leave your job, but you're uncomfortable with what's going on, there are loads of people here who would protect keep your identity private. There are loads of people who would, but would be very interested in what you have to say. So I'm just saying that. And for all of us here, I believe there's going to be people burning their licenses, am I right? I think so. Well done. But if you're not yet at that stage, okay, if that's maybe a step too far, you have power, because you can legally watch their propaganda, not to believe it, but to document it and keep note of it and publicise it on Twitter and on Facebook and anywhere else, okay? And about the last thing I want to say, I'll not talk for long, about the last thing I wanted to say was history is on our side. Because Scotland will be an independent country. And I don't know when it will happen, and I don't know how it will happen, whether it's a referendum or what political parties are pro-independence by then or not. I don't know if I'll live to see it, but it will happen. And when it happens, our Scottish kids will learn their history in school, which I never got to do. And they will learn the history of the independence movement in Scotland in the early 21st century, and they will learn the role that the British Broadcasting Corporation played in trying to prevent that independence. And by then, the BBC will be as extinct as the dinosaurs. In an independent Scotland, there will be no place, but just as now, those of us who are parents and grandparents, we know there's lots of wee boys running around saying, oh, I wish there were still dinosaurs. There will be nobody in a future independent Scotland saying, oh, I wish there was still BBC Scotland News. There is no place for them. Do you want me to shut up now, or can I tell the story of my flag? It was just your man earlier talking about the flags. I thought I'd tell you the story of this. You might notice it's a wee bit sort of the worse for wear. This is true. This was given me by a friend. My friend worked in a museum in a small town in Scotland. Now, I'll just not mention the town, okay? She worked in a museum in a small town, and outside the museum they had the flagpole and they flew the saltire, okay? And one day, it was the day Margaret Thatcher died. On that day, my friend was told, here, will you go out to the flagpole, take down the saltire and put up the Union Jack? And my friend said, no. And her boss said, what do you mean, no? And she said, no, I'm not doing it. And he said, but it's your job. I'm asking you, take down the saltire, put up the Union Jack. And she said, no, you'll have to fire me. So there was a big stooshy and a complete Mexican standoff. And somebody else stepped in and said, oh, come on, I'll do it. And they went outside with the butcher's apron. And I kid you not, this is absolutely true. The flagpole jammed and they couldn't get the saltire down. And a few months later, my friend left her job. And they gave her a wee going-away present. And by then, they'd unjammed the flagpole. And they said to her, well, seeing it means so much to you, you might as well have the flag as well. So that's the history of this flag. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Graham, and everybody for letting me speak. I'm Frankie. Have a great day. Cheers. Bye.
was hoping that Ronnie Anderson was going to join me up here just for a wee quick announcement. Ronnie, are you there? Put your hand up. There you are. We've got a wee bit of interesting news to tell you. This is BBC News, actually. Right. Get ahead.
We've just done an invitation from Mr. Ian Small to go in, 3 or 4 years, to have a wee chat. So we're going to do that. Oh, we're not now. Oh, we're not now. But we extended an invitation for Mr. Small to come out and address yous, anybody that pays a licence fee. But you're all viewers, whether you pay a licence fee or not. But he's unwilling to come and address you. So that's the situation. Okay?
The reason we declined the offer was that it presents an opportunity for the BBC to doorstop us. And if any of you know what doorstopping is, you realise it's a way of getting a comment or a little audio bite that they can use against you. So BBC, bugger off!
Okay, just before the next speaker comes up, which is Gwen, I think. The lovely Gwen. What are you doing to my mic?
Ronnie.
Ronnie. Oh, it's Ronnie first, is it? Okay. If there's anybody in the audience also, if you want to come up and say a few words, don't hesitate, just come up. It's a bit of an open mic kind of thing going on, you know. So if you've got something to say, and you don't hear it getting said, well, come up here and say it.
Hello, folks. It's a long time since I attended the mic at BBC protests. I think that would be about 2015. Now, I had a bigger pile of letters than this one. Now, I've got a wee compatriot here standing at the side of me. He's got a pile of letters. And no doubt yous at home throw them away. Well, they're evidence of coercion. Okay? This latest one. As you see on that open panel, everybody who handles that letter can see that it's come from the BBC and that yous are non-payment of a Westminster tax. So that is called coercion in Scottish law. They're trying to coerce you into paying a Westminster's tax that then devolves down to the BBC. It's illegal for them to come and cold call at your door. If we go back in the old Scottish laws, no travellers and no hawkers can chap your door. But Capita is coming to call. Yeah, I called, and they leave. Their calling card is sticking out your letterbox. Now, if you stay in a high street or that, everybody sees there's a big grid straight through a letter or a card that identifies you as a non-payer. It's also illegal in Scotland. So, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to be honest. Hands up those of you that pay a BBC licence fee. No. That's not to ridicule you. That's not to ridicule you. Yes, there are people frightened. And the scares of the early years were your credit will get damaged because they'll contact the credit companies
a load of hoo-ha. The same as £1,000 fine. There is no court in this land, Scotland, will fine anybody £1,000. There's only been 2 prosecutions in the last 2 years. Again, people that are uninformed as to how to conduct themselves in a court, or have no representation in a court, or know nothing of Scottish law. They're easily win. Open, give me a note. Pull that letter out. Did you get a, sorry. Did you get a Christmas gift for BBC? Right? That was to identify you and wish you a Merry Christmas. As Mr. Small's in there, maybe I'll pass this on to London. Reference number 6197 126 100. Now that reference number identifies me as an occupant at that address. And if Mr. Small would care to pass that on to Darlington, I'll quite willingly await a summons and go to court with the BBC. I've asked him sick for a crowdfunder to go to the Court of Sessions and take BBC to a Scottish court for their threatening behaviour for non-payment of a licence fee. We TAMS, reference number 62490707771. We gladly welcome a summons from the BBC. I gave that message out to Donalda when Donalda came there with Mr. Shorthouse leaving, and I'm still waiting on a summons. That's how brave the BBC are, or how sure they are in law, particularly Scottish law. That's how brave they are. There's a law in Scotland, David, 1688, Salvo Jude. That means whomsoever should sue the crown. And that is a law particular to us, the sovereign Scots. And when you go into the claim of rights, there's another minefield for BBC. So don't be threatened. I'll address you in that, sir. You put your hand up, honest man. Don't be threatened or cowed by the BBC. Any of you that are still paying a Westminster tax, do not be cowed. Thank you very much for turning up today. And we see a lot of stalwarts here. Thank you very much for turning up and supporting us, because this is a very important message we're trying to get across. We've got to bring the BBC to heel. And in an independent Scotland, they will need to remove themselves back to London. Now, I heard what Ruth said earlier on. There are a lot of people in that building that are sympathetic to independence. But they're also governed by unions. And the unions are British unions. The National Union of Journalism. So they people in there as journalists are operating under false pretense as journalists. They should be ashamed of themselves. totally ashamed of themselves. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm wee Tam. Situation being, I moved from Glasgow just after the referendum in 2014. Situation being, month after month after month, we had letters upon letters upon letters from the BBC demanding that I pay their TV tax. So much so that twice they sent officers out to my door around the 2014 period. The first two that came, I decided that rather than put up the intimidation, I was just going to leave the house, lock the door and leave them to it. The second time round, the man who came, two big burly geezers, straight away they pulled out the clipboard and right away they were on the case regarding my TV licence and why I hadn't paid one. Now the situation being, I've really got to stress more than anything that the TV in itself is a propaganda machine. It employs guys like Jimmy Savile, and me being a single parent, I couldn't endorse the fact that I would have to pay these people. So I've taken it upon myself not to pay. Before we know it, all these letters started coming through my door, and before we know it, the guys started coming to my door. And when they came to the door the second time, we sat and we listened to them. Have you got a TV? No. Can we come in and have a look? No. Well, the situation being, unless you let us into your property and show us that you don't have a TV, we're going to put it forward that you have got a TV. And my attitude was, give me a wee second. So I ran in, grabbed my mobile phone, and out I came. And when I grabbed my mobile phone, right away, I went to take a photo of these two henchmen that were standing on my door. And they hid behind their wee clipboard. And straight away, I happened to say to them, when they started questioning me why I was taking their photo, I told them that when I came from the conversation at my front door, that I was going back in to my social media and I was going to post their faces to every one of my friends. And needless to say, they weren't quick in shifting out the door. And I've never heard from them since. So I've really got to stress, don't be intimidated by these people. Do not take any of their mints. Don't pay it. If you don't feel like it's in your interest to pay for that building, don't pay it. But I've really got to stress more than anything, there is the issue that I'm here today regarding impartiality and how, like at Lumpet, Scotland needs its own voice coming out of that building, and that's not happening. That's what I'd like to say, and thank you very much, every one of you, for coming today. It's been a pleasure.
That was SITV Tam. Look at the size of him. He's actually 8.5 feet tall when you unfold him, right? He's, if you cut his head off, you'd see the word Scotland written inside. He's wonderful, right? Who's the next speaker we've got up? Hello? Hello, Gwen, come on. The next speaker is Gwen.
I'll just hold it. Good afternoon, Glasgow. This is us reporting from the independents and Scotland's people who actually want to choose Scotland to be the country they want to live in, and they want Scotland to run itself. This is us reporting to the BBC today. We've got live streamers out from Independence Live, and loads of people here are taking photographs. People are also tweeting, and they're also sending out lots and lots of their own individual films, because as far as I'm concerned nowadays, we are the media. This is us that decides what's happening. I don't believe what I hear coming out of that building. In fact, quite honestly, it gives me the rage. I don't even want to hear anything they've got to say. Even if it's something that they think is really important for Scotland, I'd rather hear it through our own media, because we source everything. You go to a stall, an independent stall or a shop, or you speak to people online, they've sourced what they're talking about. We don't make things up. We don't try to slant it in a certain way to make people believe a certain thing that isn't even true. We want the best for our country, and we will do absolutely anything we possibly can to get that. We're all out here today, and it's a fantastic turnout. And we've been in Inverness, we're going to Dundee next week, and we've been to Glasgow, we've been to Dumfries, and individually in every single area there are grassroots people out there who are doing something every day that they possibly can. They're learning stuff, they're speaking to people, they're talking to people on the bus, they're talking to their families, and they're telling the truth. And I was very pleased to see the hand raise in the crowd today, because hardly anybody had their hands up that are still paying for the TV licence. An absolute joke. So it's quite frankly, it's really important that we all start to just say we're not listening to the BBC anymore. They've not proved anything. A couple of weeks ago, there was a fantastic thing that happened. Edinburgh was given a Port Cruise Award for being the best in Western Europe. It wasn't on the BBC. Now that's a fantastic achievement for Scotland. There's some amazing ports for cruise ships to go into, and Edinburgh won that. Amongst many other things that are going on in Scotland, which are wonderful, they don't get reported. And if they do, they're sandwiched between negativity. And the people they interview are people who want to put Scotland down. Why are they not out here speaking to us today? Why are we not being interviewed? Sorry, I'm getting ranty, but that really upsets me. We're outside their building. We've watched their TV show all our lives. Why are they not out here? Hello, BBC. I can see you, and I can see the wee cow in the second window up there. A wee plastic cow, if you want to look up. It's not a person, it's a cow. But basically, that's just because I thought it was funny, and you might want to tweet something about that. I can think lots of fun things to say. But anyway, okay, basically, guys, well done, every single person. And we will do this. We will not put up with this anymore. Scotland deserves better than this. You deserve better than this, and so does your families. We cannot have someone reporting to the rest of the world the utter nonsense that they're saying about our wonderful country. So thanks very much. Fesker Mamaha.
Okay, the first thing I would say is the people of Scotland are the richness of Scotland. They are the most important substance, whatever you want to call it. They are the most important element in this country. The second thing I was going to talk about was also the dark money. It's all about the dark money. This should be not allowed. But unfortunately, the people who are investigating it either don't want to investigate it for whatever reason. Whether they're involved or not, I don't know. But before you go for a referendum or an election, this should be sorted out. And that's all I'm going to say.
Sorry. I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful. But we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world. Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
Humanity marches on. You can fight it or fight for it. When we say revolution, we say it with love. We must embrace defiance, rebellion, and resistance. Let us embrace the struggle, cherish the fight, and live in that love. The passion of our hearts will be raised with our fists.
Hello! Are you still there? Are you still got your ears on? Have you got any ears left after that? I'm pretty deep now. Right, we've got a chap here called David Llewellyn, who's going to come and talk to us about new media and everything that goes with that. All right, so just big hand for David Llewellyn, please. Thank you.
Hi guys. Basically, I wasn't here the last time you was in one of these. I didn't really know it was as bad as it was. but I've seen it over the last wee while, and it's been pretty shocking. I've been busy with Twitter over the last couple of days to try and get some Twitter storms going. I worked with one the other day, which was a BBC switch off, which got to 8 in the world, and it was like basically it was up there with Trump. So like basically it worked really well. Today Scotland calling has got to 7 in the number 7 in the UK. So like thanks to everybody that was out there doing their tweets and making sure that people that weren't here today can go. Anyway, basically I want to say something about new media, because I think the last time this happened, Independence Live, if it existed then, was really small, and now it's become an integral part of the Yes movement. And everywhere you go, they're there with their cameras, and they're getting us out to people, and we're getting the message out to places that the BBC just don't get to. They put out our side of the story, because the story that gets put out over there is just, it does not bear any resemblance to the reality that we're living in. So in another 5 weeks' time, I'm starting in Portree with another 9 people, and we're going to walk 500 miles. We're going to walk from Portree up the back road to Inverness, and down to Inverness, right up the coast road past Peterhead and Fraserburgh, down through Aberdeen, Dundee, Perth, Stirling, Glasgow, and like for the last day, we're going to be leaving the Queensferry and joining up with All Under One Banner March in Edinburgh, and we hope that's going to be the biggest independence march ever. That there'll be no room for BBC cameras. It'll be so busy. So I hope you all support that. We're going to be putting up a web shop shortly that's going to have merchandise that's specific to the event, and any money that's raised for that will be going to help Independence Live, Phantom Power, Ian Russell, and Truly Scottish TV, because they are the people that are doing the stuff for us just now, that's getting everything out there. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, David.
And Broadcast Scotland, sorry about that. Broadcast Scotland.
You mentioned it there. I'd like to give a big round of applause to Independence Live. They really do a massive job, and they do it. They don't get any thanks. They don't even get a jam sandwich or a cup of tea. They just do it, all right, because they love Scotland and they want us to be independent, all right? Okay. Right, who's up next? Who's going next? Is that? Right, okay. There are no more speakers, right? But I suppose I'd like to thank every single one of you for turning up. This is wonderful. Thank you for making the effort for your country. And I would like to say that I was one of the nutters who travelled the world, and when I got into a hotel room, I got on BBC 24, opened the doors, opened the windows, turned it full up to tell the world that I was the Brit that had arrived. And here was my news service. Well, what have they done? They've sullied the thing that I thought was wonderful and made us special. So, well done, BBC. I hope you're bloody glad, because we're going to get rid of you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, ladies and gents, I'm not going to tell you who I'm at because it's not really important. That's not why I came here today. I just came to show these guys some support. But there's something I want all of you to keep in mind next time you go on social media, because it's something I see all the time, and it does piss me off. See, when you see people slagging all these guys off that do the marches, organise it, saying that it's a waste. Well, I'll tell you this, ask yourself this: what's the most valuable thing you can give to someone, or anything? It's not money, it's time. And that's something they give to you all the time. So remember that. And be happy.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take away.
And as it's Scotland, we'll be finishing off with Loch Lomond. Is that alright?
Go stay with the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.